Hello everybody, my name's Gary Wills and welcome to episode 40 of my YouTube channel. This episode focuses on the demonstration game that I presented at the UK's premier historical wargaming event at Partizan in Newark on May 2025. The game is entitled The Best Army in Europe and shows the Battle of Pirmasens on the 14th September 1793, in which the Prussian army takes on and defeats a larger French Republican army. The following slides are actually taken from my salute video. The background information is all the same, so I've left those slides as was. We'll have a pick up the bit about the staff ratings, which I changed for this game. So this is the leaflet that I generated to support the game and used on the day, and I'm going to talk you through elements of it to explain the background to the game. So at the time in 1793, the Prussian army was widely considered to be the best in Europe, and the Battle of Pirmasens really emphasises what that looked like in reality. During the summer of 1793, the army of the Moselle held the line of the ridge of Schwarzbach around Zweibrücken, and this was about 46 miles west of the River Rhine. And facing them was the Prussian Army am Rhein, commanded by the Prussian king. The Duke of Brunswick's Second Corps was based in Pirmasens itself, covering the strategically important town of Kaiserslautern. The new commander of the Moselle and the representative people decided to attack Pirmasens indirectly from the north, having unsuccessfully attacked it from the west. So at 10:30 p.m. On the 13th, the Corps des Vosges, commanded by General Division Moreaux, set off from their camp at Hornbach and marched the 10.5 miles or so to Pirmasens. The French hoped to surprise the Prussians by coming at them indirectly, but Brunswick was warned the day before and was well prepared when the French reached the northeast of Pirmasens at a little village called Fehrbach. So I'm going to show a few slides that put the preceding text into a nice pretty picture. So this is a map from a history of the battle, and it shows on the right-hand side of the map the River Rhine, which I've highlighted. And here's Kaiserslautern guarding the approaches to some pretty significant cities on the east bank of the Rhine, Mannheim and up to Koblenz. And here you can see the positions of Pirmasens in the dark blue square and Hornbach, the French camp, in the lighter blue square. And this map shows the march of the French on the night of the 13th, 14th, as I've just described. And you can see also the line of the Prussian outpost to the west of Pirmasens, which had been attacked unsuccessfully in the days leading up to this battle. So this is the map for the battle, which I included in Throwing Thunderbolts, showing the deployment of the French around Fehrbach and the Prussians around Pirmasens itself. So this shows the terrain on which the battle is fought, and that I tried to model using my Callistra hexagonal terrain. And the area around Pirmasens is steep, hilly terrain, a lot of it tree covered, but although not in this case. And the normal movements only really possible on the dark brown areas, which I've indicated here with the yellow arrow on the left hand side. Everywhere else is rough ground, and so in black powder terms, I guess a lot of the rules, it halves the speed of all arms on those ground. However, there are some places which the contours sort of indicate. They're 40-metre contours, so you get some idea of how steep this ground is. But I've highlighted the extra steep slopes on this map using the sort of compound brown line, which I've indicated as an example in the bottom left-hand corner of the map. These extra steep slopes, I've reduced the speed to a quarter speed for infantry and cavalry, and made them impassable to artillery except on any roads or tracks. I mentioned this in the text in Throwing Thunderbolts, although but this map shows it much more clearly. And the final thing is that the streams are in sort of rocky valleys, and they are crossable even by the artillery, but they count as linear obstacles costing 6 centimetres a time. We know they were crossable because some of the French guns actually got onto the Schauenburg in the top left-hand corner there, so they couldn't have done that unless they'd crossed these streams. So this chart overlays the historical deployment of the two sides. Essentially, the Prussians were camped to the left of this map, and essentially Brunswick redeployed them to receive the French. And you can stop the video and look at this in detail, but Corbier's division, I'll come on to it, is on the left of the line, with Kalkstein's division on the right, and they extended their line with some a group of Schutzen and a grenadier battalion along the Ruppertwald, which was a forest just off the map to the south. For the French, the French arrived early in the morning, and they were assembled just off the map behind Fehrbach, where there was a dip that concealed them from the Prussians. And when he got there, Moreaux rather belatedly divided them all up into 3 columns for the attack. And you can see the Park artillery at the bottom of their deployment, ready to try and take on the Prussians. The cavalry, Brunswick used the cavalry, the dragoons and cuirassiers to, I think, just to limit the French deployment early on. But as soon as they were engaged by the artillery, they withdrew in line with the infantry, so that it cleared a killing ground in front of the 2 Prussian gun lines. So I'm now going to go through the orders of battles for both sides, and this diagram is an original order of battle for the Prussians, showing how Brunswick's corps was organised. So again, going back to my leaflet, at the very top level, essentially the Prussians were about 8,000 men commanded by the Duke of Brunswick, and the French came to about 12,000 men commanded by General de Division Jean-René Moreau, who not the famous Moreau, but Moreau with an X. And this is the desktop roller banner that I use to give information on the battle to people viewing the table. And so I'm going to take you through the orders of battle using snapshots of that. So here's the French order of battle. And so, as I said at the beginning, the French force was essentially the Corps des Vosges, minus 1 or 2 units that were left back in the camp at Hornbach. And here's a lovely engraving of Jean-René Moreaux. And essentially this table will show both the strengths of the battalions as I've been able to find them out, plus how I represented them on the table, a figure ratio of 1 to 33, one figure for 33 men, and plus their black powder size. So the first column, or the right column, was led by Paul Guillaume, and he had a mixture of regular old Royal Army regiments and volunteers, which a pattern which goes through the whole army. One thing that is important to stress is that these weren't permanent organisations. Essentially, he took the generals he had and allocated regiments to them pretty much on the day. And so you can see I'm not going to go through each unit in turn, but each of the infantry units was accompanied by 2 4-pounder battalion guns. And there were also tirailleurs drawn from those infantry units, plus some free companies of chasseurs, in this case Guillaume's own free company. So the centre company was led by General de Division Francois Xavier Jacob Freytag, and again he had a mixture of regular battalions, volunteer battalions, and free companies of chasseurs, in this case from Paris. He also had tirailleurs drawn from the heavy infantry, if you want to call it that. One thing to point out here is that the French battalions were much bigger than the Prussian equivalents. So there's a lot of large units in this order of battle. So the French left column was led by General de Division Louis Lecoy, and he had the same setup as Freytag, with a mixture of regular infantry or royal infantry and volunteer infantry, plus free company of chasseurs, as well as the tirailleurs drawn from the other battalions, and in this case 5 pairs of battalion guns. He also I believe had the cavalry, which was the 9th Chasseurs à Cheval and the 14th Dragoons. Other people have assumed that the cavalry was with Guillaume because he was the advance guard, and that would match other French orders of battle that you see from 1793, 1794 and onwards. However, Moreau in his report specifically says that the cavalry was with his left column, and the 14th Dragoons are actually in reserve. So that's where I've put them. Obviously you can twiddle about with it as you will. It's confused because Guillaume was the furthest forward of the French columns as the battle developed, and ended up with collaborating with the cavalry. Finally, there was the reserve, which is essentially the park artillery, and this was led by General de Brigade Jean-Baptiste Félix de Manscourt de Rosailles, and he had a combination of 12-pounders, 4 12-pounders, 10 8-pounders and 5 6-inch howitzers. And this is slightly different to what's in the book. I misinterpreted some of Colin's references, so I've corrected that in my corrections web page for those who want to seek it out. But these are the real numbers, so it's effectively one model of 12-pounder artillery, one model of 8-pounders, and a model of howitzers. Also with the reserve was the 4th Regiment of Cavalry. Now I haven't represented these in the game because they didn't take part in the battle at all, except towards the end, and they lost 2 men missing, so they clearly didn't do much. Finally, there was a tiny unit or detachment of the 1st Battalion de Yonne as a sort of artillery guard. So let's move on to the Prussians, and it's the 2nd Corps of the Armée de Rhine. It was commanded by the Duke of Brunswick, and there you see him in his 1790s uniform. Essentially, the corps was made up of 2 divisions of infantry, supported by a reserve, included a light infantry brigade, which was deployed on the outposts throughout the battle. But dealing with the troops that were actually there, the 1st Division was led by this guy, General Lieutenant de Corbière. So de Corbière only had one of his 2 brigades present, and that was that of General Major Ludwig Prince zu Baden, and this is the handsome chap here. Unusually, his brigade contained battalions from 3 different regiments, which are listed there. They each had detachments of Schützen and also battalion guns, in this case 6-pounder guns. There were also 2 separate artillery units which are listed there, both foot artillery. One thing to point out here is you can see that the Prussians infantry are in small units, 12-figure units. This is different to what I wrote in Throwing Thunderbolts, where I put them at 16 figures and made them standard unit. The reason I did that in the book was I wanted to give them another inbuilt advantage by giving them standard unit status, because it works out that when you take the Schützen and the artillery crews for the battalion guns off, given the assumed strength of about 500 men, the battalion should be about 13 figures strong. They're 4 companies. I like to represent company strength, so that's why I ended up with, again, went slightly over with 16. When it actually comes to put them on the table, though, they fit the battlefield better if they're smaller units. So I've gone with this, and we'll see how it plays out as my replays play out. A separate brigade was Roeder's Brigade of Guards, and this was 2 battalions of the Guards of Vosges with their 4 battalion guns, plus a small howitzer company made up of 4 guns. So the 2nd of the 2 divisions was led by this guy, General Lieutenant von Kalkstein, and he had both of his brigades with him. So his organisation was more typical. So the 1st Brigade was led by General Major von Herzberg, and his brigade was made up of the 3 battalions of the Duke of Brunswick's regiment, and that is 2 line battalions plus a battalion of grenadiers. And at this time in the war, each regiment had a full battalion of grenadiers, unlike what you see in some of the later depictions. Again, they had a small unit of Schutzen, plus battalion guns, 6-pounders again, and also an artillery company supported the brigade. So the second brigade was led by General Major von Romberg, seen here, and he had the 3 battalions of the Prince Heinrich regiment, and with their associated Schutzen and battalion guns again, 6 battalion guns, 6-pounders, and also a battalion of foot artillery, 6-pounders again. As I said earlier on, the Schutzen of both of these brigades were taken away and placed on the extreme right flank of the army in the very rough ground that I showed on the map. This is very typical of the way Schutzen were deployed. So yes, the Prussian had light infantry, but they didn't use them in the same way as the French, and they tended to detach them away from the battalions that they came from and use them in outpost work, as they did in this battle. Finally, the Corps had a cavalry division led by this guy, General Lieutenant von Schoenfeld, and that was comprised of 2 brigades. The first brigade was made up of von Katz's brigade and comprised a dragoon regiment, which I represented in 2 units to represent their 5 squadrons, plus half a horse artillery battery. There was also another dragoon regiment, which those of you who've read Throwing Thunderbolts would have seen in the original order of battle, but they were on the outpost line that I'd indicated earlier on to the west of the battlefield, and didn't take part in the fighting. So the final brigade was General Major von Borstel's brigade of cuirassiers, which again was 5 squadrons made up of his own regiment. Again, those of you who've read Throwing Thunderbolts will be wondering where the Hussars are, particularly seeing some of my social media posts. I did paint them up, but the reality is the Hussars, the Jaegers and the Fusilier battalions that were part of the Second Corps were not called back to the battlefield, despite the Prussians being outnumbered by about 50%. Brunswick preferred to leave the Hussars and the light infantry doing what he believed they were supposed to do, which is maintain the line of outposts to the west of Pirmasens in case of an attack by one of the other corps from the Army of the Moselle. So how did I represent it on the day in the game? Well, essentially it's about 600 figures, 40 guns and 35 limbers, and you can see some pictures of the figures here. I used the chariot miniatures figures for the Prussians and some of the French, and some French are also miniature figurines, and I used the irregular miniatures 7 Years' War dragoon figures to represent the one of the regiments of dragoons on the Prussian side, and the 4th Cavalry on the French side. So in terms of victory conditions, the French are trying to force the Prussians away from Pirmasens so they can occupy it and important ground around it. So in order to do that, they need to break 3 Prussian brigades in order to break the Prussian army. The French are are less articulated in their organisation, so the Prussians need to only defeat 2 of their brigades in order to break the French army and win the battle. So, as regards game length is concerned, the historical battle took place between 10 a.m. and 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and so that represents about 13 game turns. It's a little bit of a challenge to do it in that time because the ground is so difficult for the French to get to grips with the Prussians, as you'll see with the game. But there's nothing magical about 13 game turns. It could have gone on all day. It didn't, bar 1 o'clock in the real battle. The French were running for the hills by 1 o'clock, having been destroyed by the Prussians at their fire and their counterattack. So yeah, 13 game turns is a guide to how long it should take, but if the French do better, then it might go on longer, and probably could go, given the time of year, probably could go another 13 turns before it got dark. I wanted to say something about leadership and experience, just to finish off the orders of battle, and so I can talk about the staff ratings that I've given the 2 sides. And this shows you the column commanders for the French and the senior commanders for the Prussians. And obviously it's often said that the Prussians were aged commanders, and you can see a big age difference represented here between from the Duke of Brunswick up to Kalkstein at 68. However, one thing to note is 2 of the Prussian division commanders were fairly recent promotions to General Lieutenant, and this varies very differently from the French. You can see the French commanders are a good 20 years younger than their Prussian counterparts, but the important thing is that the seniority of them is very different. So most of these people got their rank as General of Division literally in the 2 months running up to the battle, a week even in the case of Guillaume and Freytag, and Guillaume was only a general of the brigade. So, and this probably explains why one of the criticisms of Moreaux is that he really didn't get his men organised into divisions at all, and he simply arranged them in columns for the attack at 9 o'clock on the morning of the battle. On top of this, the Prussians had 5 other brigade commanders that helped with their movement of their troops. So let's now look at the 2 commanders, starting with the Duke of Brunswick for Prussia. He was widely regarded as the foremost soldier in Europe at the time, and was anytime anybody had an army they needed command in, his name came up, and this included command of the British troops in Flanders once the Duke of York went home in 1795. His experience is extensive, and goes back to 1756 in the 7 Years' War. He was acknowledged as a master of irregular warfare, i.e. the warfare of outposts with light troops. During the War of Bavarian Succession in 1777, he was thoroughly endorsed by Frederick the Great, and then in 1787 the Prussians were widely admired for the way they put down the Dutch Patriot Revolt, pretty much simply by turning up and being there. the Prussian army more generally also gained laurels in the way they dealt with the Polish partition issue in the early 1790s. But nonetheless, the Duke of Brunswick had a strong track record, a successful track record in command. And we tend to think about him in terms of what happened at Auerstadt, where he died in 1806, and that tends to mask his real performance earlier on in his career. So let's talk about Jean-René Moreau of the commanding the French Corps de Vosges. His experience goes back to enlisting in the ranks of the Royal Army in 1776-78. He was on St. Lucia in 1778, but then retired from the army and went back to running a family business. But when the revolution broke out, he joined the 1st Ardennes Volunteers in 1792 and was elected their lieutenant colonel. So he had experience at early battles of the First War of the First Coalition and had been wounded twice. So Léon Moreau was a grandson of René, and he wrote a book about his grandfather, where he felt that military history had not done his father a service, and he ended up in correspondence with Jomini, and this is what Jomini said about René. If your brave ancestor could not be classified among the great outstanding captains as Frederick the Great and Napoleon, he should be counted amongst those second-rate generals whom the revolution brought forth and who saved France by their courage, their energy, their self-denial and a natural talent for war. And, you know, whatever we tend to think about these guys from 200 years, is worth noting that Moreau got his name on the Arc de Triomphe amongst many more famous names that you can see in the picture on the right. So in terms of the game, how do we represent this in terms of staff ratings in black powder? Well, this is what I went with. The Prussians, I gave a staff rating of 8, which is good, and the French a rating of 7, which is average. However, it is modified by the fact that obviously not only is the Duke of Brunswick there, but there are 3 division commanders, and so each one of those commanders has the ability to give a re-roll to one of their brigade commanders a turn, and you've really got a choice. You can either put the Prussian staff rating up to 9 and not bother with any re-rolls. It's because the effect is about the same, but I think this is probably the best way of doing it. With a staff rating of 7, it's arguable whether the French commander deserves a re-roll, but he's got no other role unless you give him a re-roll, so I gave him one. So when you look at the averages of rolling 2d6, what that turns out into, the Prussians will move perhaps 1.4 moves a turn, whereas the French will only average 1 move a turn. If you want a game to run quicker, it's probably worth giving the French a slightly higher staff rating, say up to 8, because that will move things along. The re-rolls have an effect of moving the Prussians up to 1.8 moves a turn, and the French up to probably close to 1.4. So for the game at Partizan, I did as I just suggested, which is increase the staff rating for the French up to 8, which is perhaps a bit generous given their performance on the day. but in a demonstration game it's important to keep things moving. The Prussians still have the advantage of extra re-rolls, so they should still be expected to move a bit faster if they needed to. So let's get on. So here's the game set up in the big shed at Newark, the George Stephenson Centre or whatever it's called, and you can see here my brand new kite banner to draw everybody's attention to our game, and I'll take you through the setup in a bit more detail. In this close-up you can see that I use a desktop banner to show key information about the game and the OOBs. I'm not sure how many people actually read it on the day, but it's there. And then the leaflets that I showed you earlier, I tend to use to decorate the table as much as anything. Some people photograph them, very few people take them away, but they're there and they make the information freely available. So this shows the Prussian position stretching from the Steinbach on the bottom right, wooded and steep gully area, through the centre of the Prussian position on the left, bottom left, and the extreme left of the Prussian position on the top left. Facing the Prussians on the left of the photograph here, you can see the massed columns of the French army, who were really struggling for space in the area that René Moreau had chosen to attack from. So what I'm now going to do is take you through the French columns one at a time, so you can link them back to the order of battle. So here on the extreme right is Guillaume's advance guard or right column, combining a mix of regular infantry, volunteers, light infantry, and some horse artillery or artillerie légère, as the French called it. To the left of him is the central column led by Freytag, which are large numbers of French line infantry and volunteer infantry deployed in column with their battalion guns and some light infantry. Next we have Lecoy's left column, and this is very similar in composition to Freytag's. And finally we have the reserve led by Manscourt, which was mainly the Park artillery, which you can see deployed there. But in this game I also gave them the 14th Dragoons, which is consistent with how Moreau himself described their deployment. The chasseurs à cheval are at the rear of Lecoy's column next to them. So now we're going to look at the other side of the battlefield in more detail, and this irregular triangle marks the deployment of the Prussian army. So on the left we have the Prince Baden's brigade of 3 battalions of line infantry with their battalion guns. He was the only brigade of Corbier's division who were present at the battle, and you can see their divisional artillery, or brigade artillery rather, at the top of the red line box with the massed artillery. Switching now to the centre of the Prussian position, we have in the rear von Roeder's Guards Brigade with 2 battalions of infantry, their battalion guns and some Schützen. On the right of the Prussian position we have von Romberg's brigade of Kalkstein's division, and they were a bit stretched out because in order to prevent the French attacking them through the broken ground, Romberg detached one of his grenadier battalions plus all his Schützen, and the rest of the Kalkstein's divisional Schützen into the Steinbach area to hold the line. The other thing that we see the Duke of Brunswick doing here is brigading the rest of the division's battalion guns into two batteries, and you can see them here at the top left-hand corner of the red box. And in the front centre of the infantry line you have von Herzberg, the other brigade of von Kalkstein's division, 3 battalions again, and in front of them are the brigade artillery assets. Deployed well to the fore of the infantry are the 2 cavalry brigades. First of all, von Borstel's cuirassier brigade and von Katz's dragoon brigade with its half battery of horse artillery. These seem to have been deployed here to make the French deploy further back rather than have a main role in the battlefield, because in the battle itself, because Brunswick promptly withdrew them. So that's the setup. Let's go through some photographs showing how the game progressed turn by turn. So here's the position at the end of French turn 1 in overview. And here's a closer view of the French progress. So initially the French artillery was deployed pretty much out of range of anything to shoot at. And so here we see Manscore in the foreground, moving forward his artillery, supported by the 14th Dragoons. And in the background, you can see the advance guard on the right, making slow progress down the slope. Meanwhile, Freytag and Lecoy's infantry are watching. And here's the overview at the end of Prussian turn 1. So for the game I followed the historical plan of the Prussians, which involved withdrawing the cavalry because you didn't want to face the whole French army on their own. So here you see Borstel's brigade having withdrawn to the left flank, to the right flank of the Prussian centre. Meanwhile, Katz's dragoons have withdrawn into the central position, covering the road. And this is an overview of the position at the end of French turn 2. So on the French right, we can see that Guillaume's column has continued to advance into the Blumenthal, a valley of rocky streams, etc. While the French dragoons are leading the way as the artillery redeploys. Lecoy's infantry have started to move, but Freytag's brigade has been left stranded on the heights. Now we move on to the end of Prussian turn 2, and as you can see here, the Prussian cavalry withdrawal has stuttered to a halt. But if we move to the Prussian left, we can see there has been some movement. The brigade has sent forward its Schützen to skirmish with the French, while the infantry have moved forward to line one of the streams. However, having looked at the pictures, I made a mistake here, so I allowed their battalion guns to advance 2 moves with the infantry, which they're not allowed to do unlimbered. And here we see the overview of the game at the end of French turn 3. So let's look at the French advance in a bit more detail. So here in the foreground you can see Guillaume's column has been stopped by the stream they were trying to cross, but their horse artillery has managed to advance along the road due to the free move with a failed order. Next to him, Freytag has got forward at last, and next to him you can see the columns of Lecoy have got forward to another stream. These streams are considered standard linear obstacles, so make heavy weather of it when all of the infantry is moving at half speed over this terrain. In the top of the photograph you can see Manscorp's reserve units have failed to move this turn. So the end of Prussian turn 3, and what's happened here is that the two cavalry brigades have completed their withdrawal to each flank of Kalkstein's division on the height to the top right of Pirmasens. And here we can see the situation at the end of French turn 4. And in a bit more close up here at the bottom of the picture, you can see Guillaume's division has got moving forward again and handling the slopes quite well. Freytag, on the other hand, has come to a resounding halt as they manage the steep slopes, while Lecoy's column has continued its advance across the rocky stream. The problems of managing the large number of units has resulted in the chasseurs à cheval being a bit left behind. And in this final shot you can see that in the centre of the picture Manscorp's reserve column has made some progress. The dragoons are out front leading the way, and the howitzer battery rather is advancing down the road. As happened in the original battle, you can see the French columns are being funneled into the Blumenthal. One of the problems they faced is that if they went the other side of the road or onto the top causeway, they would be coming instantly under fire from the Prussian gun line. So they naturally tended to herd towards the Blumenthal valley in front of us. And here we can see at the end of Prussian turn 4, their cavalry completing their withdrawal into the infantry lines. And on the Prussian left, not much has happened, which is just as well as it allows me to compensate for the dodgy movement of the battalion guns last turn. And here's another view of the Prussian centre. One of the points to make is that the terrain is an obstacle, quite a big obstacle even for the Prussians, as we'll find out. The dark green lichen here indicates very severe slope, so reducing movement for infantry and cavalry to a quarter. Here we are now at the end of French turn 5. And here we see Guillaume's advance guard has continued its advance down the edge of the board, led by the horse artillery and the tirailleurs. To the right of this picture you can see Lecoy's infantry columns have made significant progress advancing past the dragoons, but Freytag's column is again stuck, not having made much progress at all, while Manscorp's reserve brigade has also stopped this turn. So this is the overview at the end of Prussian turn 5. So here you can see that at the bottom of the picture, the Prince de Baden is moving his guys further forward to face the French. And here's that moving close up again. The terrain caused difficulties in slowing down the infantry manoeuvring. So here we move on to the end of French turn 6. And as you can see in this photograph, not much has happened on the French side. Guillaume and Lecoy's columns have come to a halt. In the centre of the picture, you can see that the French howitzer battery has managed to get deployed, and in the distance, Freytag's column has started to move forward. So for the Prussians, game turn 6 all involved the left wing, where the Prince de Baden's brigade continued their redeployment, and their Schützen got into action, disordering the limbered horse artillery. So this photograph shows the overview at the end of game turn 7. The highlight of the turn was the howitzer battery causing the first casualties on the Prussian dragoons. However, you can see here that the French infantry as a whole had made little further progress due to a series of poor staff rolls. And again, this photograph emphasises the funneling effect of the steep-sided valleys, pulling the 3 columns of French infantry closer together. And here is the overview of the battlefield at the end of Prussian turn 7. At the bottom of the picture, you can see the Prince de Baden's brigade has completed its deployment along the rocky stream. And at the top of this chart, photograph, you can see the red token indicating that the howitzer battery has been disordered by the Prussian fire. We now move on to the end of French turn 8. At the bottom of this picture, you can see that although Guillaume's infantry have not got any further forward, the horse battery has managed to unlimber and has fired and inflicted casualties and disorder on the nearest Prussian infantry battalion. In the centre of this photograph, you can see Lecoy's brigade making progress across the difficult streams, supported by some of Manskor's artillery. However, Freytag's column is still struggling to get across the difficult streams of the Blumenthal. And here we are at the end of Prussian turn 8 in overview. At the bottom of the photograph, Prince de Baden's brigade awaits the onslaught from the French. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, von Romberg has sent 2 of his battalions forward to try and take out the howitzer battery on the spur, which has itself taken the casualty from the massed Prussian artillery fire. So we're now moving on to the end of French turn 9. And in the centre of this picture, the French howitzer battery has inflicted a casualty on the left-hand battalion of von Romberg's advance. In the centre, the column of Lecoy has overtaken Guillaume, advancing on the position held by the Prince de Baden, avoiding the centre of the Prussian position and the massed artillery there. In behind them, the column of Freytag is struggling still to get across the Blumenthal and into the action. We now move on to the end of Prussian Turn 9. At the top of this picture you can see von Romberg's 2 battalions advancing very slowly on the howitzer battery, which has turned to face them. Meanwhile, on the Prussian left, Prince Ribarden's brigade is engaging the French skirmishers to their front. Now moving on to the end of French Turn 10, we see the battlefield in overview here. And while it's been shaken by the fire of the infantry and the Prussian artillery, the howitzer battery managed to disorder the nearest Prussian battalion and to shake it. The Prussian, in this sense, struggling with only a stamina of 2, as they are small battalions. On the French right, Guillaume's column has started to advance again, much to the relief of everybody involved. And at least some of Freytag's column has got across the Blumenthal and is starting to ascend the slopes. So now we move on to the end of Prussian Turn 10. In the centre of this picture you can see von Romberg's men have continued their advance on the howitzer brigade battery, although one of the units can't charge. The right-hand unit has moved into position to hopefully get a charge away next turn. Meanwhile, in the centre of this photograph and the centre of the Prussian position, the dragoons have advanced to cover the deployment of the rest of Kalkstein's division as it tries to make an attack exploiting the exposed flank of Lecroix's brigade or column. And we're now at the end of French Turn 11. In the centre of the position, the French dragoons have advanced to cover the flank of the howitzer battery, while another French battery has deployed and inflicted 2 casualties on the oncoming Prussian dragoons. Meanwhile, on the French right, although the French infantry is crowding on their position, no serious advance has been made, but the fire from the artillery has shaken the left-hand battalion in the Prince Ribarden's brigade. And here we are now at the end of Prussian Turn 11. While von Romberg's infantry have failed to get into contact with the howitzer battery, the dragoons of von Katt in the centre have also failed to charge home against the French dragoons, who are biding their time, awaiting their moment. We're now moving on to the end of French Turn 12. And this chart shows, just to start off, the vagaries of black powder command and control. The chasseurs à cheval have got left behind as they're a long way from their commanding officer, showing the demerits of mixed cavalry infantry brigades. We're first going to look at the scrum of infantry in front of the Prince Ribarden's position. And here at the bottom of the photograph you can see Lecroix's got one of his large infantry battalions across the river to charge the Prince Ribarden's leftmost battalion and force it back. The green tokens indicate casualties, but because the French battalion is a large one, it's still not shaken. And the rest of Prince Eubaden's brigade at the moment is holding the French off. And this photograph shows the rest of Prince Eubaden's brigade in more detail. At the top of this picture you can see the confrontation between the two dragoon brigades, and in this case the artillery fire from the French has shaken the leading Prussian dragoon unit, which would prevent it from charging. At the bottom of the picture you can see von Romberg's unsuccessful attempt to attack the howitzer battery, which has resulted in both battalions becoming shaken. Again, they only have a stamina of 2, being small units. And the result of this is that von Romberg's brigade of Kalkstein's division is now broken, because more than half of its units are shaken or destroyed. And now we move on to the end of Prussian turn 12. So the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that the game has now changed venues. I got through 12 turns on the day at Partizan, but didn't quite finish the game. So with the aid of my photographs, I was able to reset the game up at home and continue it to a finish. In this photograph in the centre, you can see von Romberg's brigade begin their remorseless retreat back to their own lines and ultimately off the table as a broken brigade. Beyond them you can see von Katt has rallied the larger of his 2 units in his dragoon brigade, reducing their casualties to 2, and therefore they're no longer shaken. Covering them, the smaller unit has got beyond them but has not made contact with the French line. In the centre of this chart you can see the 3 battalions of von Herzberg's brigade of Kalkstein division continue with their very slow march through very difficult terrain to get into the flank of Lecoy's column and support the Prince Eubaden. Despite having to withdraw, the left-hand battalion of the Prince Eubaden's brigade did manage to break with its fire the large French battalion in front of them, and they disappeared, never to be seen again. Also in the centre of the brigade, one of the smaller French columns was shaken by the Prussian fire. And this is the overview at the end of Prussian turn 12. So we're now moving on to French turn 13, and I'll take you through this turn in a bit more detail. And it starts with a charge between 2 of the dragoon units in the centre of the battlefield. And the combat started well here. You can see the Prussians inflicted 6 hits on the French dragoons, while the French dragoons only inflicted 4 hits on the Prussians. However, amazingly, the French 14th Dragoons mimicked their behaviour in the real battle by saving all of their hits, while the Prussians only saved 1 of theirs. This meant that the Prussians, despite their heavy cavalry +1 advantage, lost the combat with an excess casualty. And in their break test they scored 5, which forced them into a retreat. Meanwhile, on the French right, one of the larger battalions from Lecoy's column charged home against the centre battalion of the Prince Eubaden's brigade. The result was 7 hits on the Prussian infantry and only 2 on the French, as you can see marked here. And this proved another disaster for the Prussians. They failed to save 5 of their hits, while the French only saved 1 of their own hits. So that's a 5-1 difference, as shown in this photograph. And that required a brake test. And this was a disastrous brake result for the Prussian infantry battalion, which ran into the hills with its accompanying battalion guns. This is an overview of the action on the French right, with the Prince-Zubarden's brigade now in dire straits. And amid all the chaos, the chasseurs à cheval still remain glued to their position on the slopes overlooking the fighting. And this is a final shot giving an overview of the fighting at the end of French turn 13. We now move on to Prussian turn 13, and the first action was a charge by the rallied larger Prussian Dragoon regiment on the so far victorious 14th French Dragoons, highlighted here. Also point out the smaller Prussian Dragoon regiment should be shaken. I've put the wrong token on it at this point. It should be shaken rather than just having 1 casualty, as well as being disordered. So in the initial clash, the Prussians scored 5 hits out of their 8 dice, while the French scored 3 out of their 6 dice, as shown in this photograph. And again, the French saved all of their hits, while the Prussians only saved 2 of theirs. So with 2 supports to the Prussian 1, the French Dragoons won that melee out, even though the Prussian Dragoons had a +1 heavy cavalry. So this required the Prussian Dragoons to take a brake test, already having 2 existing casualties, and they failed that test and disappeared from the table. The French Dragoons then followed up with a sweeping advance into the supporting Dragoons, who were, as I've said already, should have been shown as shaken as well as disordered. And in the hand-to-hand combat, the French scored 4 hits and suffered only 2, as you can see marked here. Of these, the French saved both their hits, while the Prussians saved only 3 of theirs. So this meant that the sweeping advance ended in another French victory, with 1 casualty on the already shaken Prussian Dragoons, who on their brake test were forced to retreat. And here you can see ringed in red the new position of the surviving Dragoons from Katz's brigade. Meanwhile, the victorious French 14th Dragoons rallied back to their own lines out of the way of the Prussian artillery. On the Prussian left, because of what happened in the French part of the turn, the Prince-Zubarden's brigade was broken, having 1 shaken and 1 broken unit, and so it had started to pull back from the line of the stream. In the centre, alongside the retiring Dragoons, you can see von Herzberg's brigade struggling across the rough ground to get into the flank of the French column. And this shot shows an overview of the zone of the fighting at the end of the Prussian turn 13. On the left of this shot, you can see von Romberg's 2 shaken infantry battalions retiring away from the howitzer battery in the centre. And here's a final view of the table. Right, so the game ended there. At this point in the game, at the end of the Prussian turn 13, 3 of their brigades were broken. The von Romberg's brigade, the Prince zu Baden's brigade, and von Katz's dragoon brigade. Now, strictly speaking, it wouldn't be until the beginning of Prussia turn 14 that that situation would be established. But nonetheless, there didn't seem a lot of point in playing another French turn just to get to a position we already knew where we were. So with a score of 3 brigades broken to 0 French brigades, had to declare the game a French victory. A bit unexpected, given the historical result was the exact opposite of that. But you could see during the game, the French cavalry particularly did pretty well with their saving throws. Right, to finish off this video, I want to show you a gallery of all of the photographs that visitors to my table put up on the internet following the event, and these are quite useful. It's great that these people have gone out of their way to take photographs of my game and others and make them available on the internet. They're very useful because, as you've seen, I tend to take quite long range shots of the table to tell the story I want to tell, whereas obviously other people are more interested, and I'm sure you're more interested in some close-ups of the figures on the table. So I hope you enjoy this gallery. Well, there you are. A bit of a long video today, but I hope you enjoyed it. Enjoyed all the photographs that other people have taken of my game. If you have enjoyed it, please consider buying Flowing Thunderbolts. It tells you everything you need to know about wargaming, Pirmasens, and all of the first coalition as a whole. There are 10 scenarios in it, and I'm sure that you'll find something you like. Also, if you have liked the video, please like it and subscribe in the usual way. Thank you. Goodbye.